All right, everybody. I think it's like 2:44 p.m., but I have never been known to finish my talks early, so I'm just going to start. Thank you all so much for being here at the summit today. Hopefully, this has been invigorating. I've been at AWS. My name is Andrew Baird. I'm a principal solutions architect. I've been an SA for 8 years at Amazon, and I'm so excited every time our company comes to Atlanta. It hasn't always had events this big in our neck of the woods, so thank you for coming here and giving us your time. It shows us that Atlanta's worth investing other events like this in, so thank you again. The other reason I'm so excited to talk today is I'm joined, or going to be joined on stage by Brittany Doncaster, who is my customer now from a solution architect standpoint. She works at Delta Airlines, but she used to be my teammate. She was an SA for AWS for 5 years, and we've spoken at 3 different re:Invents together. So now we get to present again, but she gets to talk about all the cool things she's actually implementing that I usually just get to talk about with customers like yourself. So what we're here to talk to you today about is serverless, and specifically how to take all the goodness in a serverless operating model and all the architectures that you probably want to see implemented broadly at our company, and make it an effective enterprise-grade strategy. How do you become serverless first as an enterprise? So I'm going to lead the first part of the talk, generally describing what I've seen at other customers be successful, some things I think you should focus on. We're not going to go into a ton of technical depth about like what the implementation should look like, because that will vary a lot, but it's a 300-level session, so I'm assuming everybody in this room knows a lot about serverless already. And we're going to empower you and enable you with some strategies and things you should be taking back into your organization so you can help potentially a very large company pivot to become serverless first. So here's the agenda of how we're going to get there. I'm going to cover the first half talking about reminders for why this is a strategy we think is worth pursuing, highlighting what we think are the important elements of what makes this type of serverless first strategy really enterprise grade or quality. Some implementation kind of focuses and direction to help you understand where to start and what to start building. And then I'm going to transition to Brittany, who's going to spend hopefully the second 2/3, if I manage to get off stage in the next 7 minutes. The next 2/3 talking about what it's really looked like at Delta Airlines so far, with her role kind of leading an organization that's adopting a strategy like this. Reminder, serverless first. Everybody hopefully has heard of the benefits of serverless by now, using things like AWS Lambda, Fargate, cost that grows with your usage, very developer-oriented services, enabling innovation, speed to market, ability to focus on feature functionality and services rather than operations and infrastructure. All of those things are true, and there's tons of data and case studies you can look into for customers who have felt these benefits. I'm not going to spend a lot of time justifying these because I want to get to the meat of why you're here. How do you do this in an enterprise? So if you want to implement a serverless first strategy and become a serverless first organization as an enterprise, there's something that is always it has to be true. And you can achieve this with your best Michael Scott hat on, or best impersonation. You could just go into your office one day and say, I declare we are serverless first. And maybe you'll have a lot of people that are on your side and decide that that's a good strategy to pursue, but you might not get a lot of traction with it. But at some point, there's got to be a cadre of folks who really want serverless first to be a direction you're heading in. That statement can have a lot more power when it's coming from your CIO or your CTO. If you have put your CTO in a position to feel like they have bought in and they are enabling their organization to have them say something like this in a meeting or at an all hands, it's going to carry a lot of weight. But the thing that really is the inflection point that honestly I believe has to occur if you want serverless first to be a formal strategy that your team has taken. If there's any C-level folks in the room or technology leaders, put it in writing. If you get your CIO or your CTO to empower you through something in writing that says this is the formal architecture strategy of our organization, serverless first is the way we're headed, that effectively arms and empowers folks in the organization to kind of decentralize that authority and take it into architecture meetings and make sure that the strategy is really what's driving decisions down on the ground level. So that's the place you want to get to, I think. And from that moment forward, hopefully you as technology practitioners you feel empowered to fight against architectural inertia, habits and patterns that you believe could be built better in serverless, drive the value that you want to get out of it. So you need to be thinking about what are the benefits, on my first slide there, that my executives are going to care the most about, and what do I need to educate them on so that they feel comfortable and motivated that this is a strategy or a document or a mandate that they're going to put out formally in your organization. So that's audience number one for you. If you're an engineer or a team lead or an architect, is who has the authority in your organization to pivot the architectural strategy, and how do I advocate on behalf of this vision that you might have, so that they feel motivated and supportive of that being the new formal strategy of the architecture direction for your company. So you want to get there. And so how do you get there? So this is what we think are worth selling as part of like the enterprise grade components of the strategy that you would walk an executive through and what your team would focus on building. It's obviously got to be scalable. If you're part of an enterprise company, whatever you're going to offer back that's going to be adopted in a company at size, it's got to be available through self-service artifacts. Good news is that serverless, inherently lends itself to artifacts that are easily consumed and deployable. Things like, CDK apps and constructs and CloudFormation templates. Everything is going to be offered through those mechanisms, and that's going to demonstrate self-service is going to be there. You're going to get speed to market benefits. You're going to get to focus on things that matter for the products and features that your business cares about, because you've offered these things that are deployable and are real pieces of infrastructure. You're going to treat them like real products that the organization's offered. You're not just going to evangelize on behalf of serverless and create demo applications. You're going to document those self-service artifacts like they are a core part of what your developers are able to adopt when they're building out their own applications. And you're going to build, hand-holding walkthroughs. A lot of enterprises have very, wide varieties of skills and knowledge and, places that people are in their careers, and the amount of knowledge that they'll have about serverless is going to vary kind of equally. So the more that you can enable self-service artifacts that demonstrate and describe to people how to get started with them without having to ask another human a question and slow their work down or make them feel embarrassed about needing help or something, and thorough documentation about how those artifacts should be launched and how they lead to a production application, the more that we've seen adoption will grow within your organization. So wrap branding around it, a product around it. The team is building documentation for it. And what you're really offering is artifacts that are deployable. Then you're going to focus on what a lot of executives care about, the security aspects of your architecture. So things that developers often leave out of when they're thinking about the cool stuff they want to build for their teams and the applications that they build. You take some of the heavy lifting away, the undifferentiated heavy lifting that has to occur in terms of security, and implement those into the artifacts that you provide. So things like, what does API authorization look like for serverless applications? How do you manage secrets? Things that you believe can be implemented in a repeatable, a high-quality manner within a serverless architecture. And once you've built that capability into something that's automatically deployable, there's a big area of risk that you've inherently implemented into what's going to be deployed by your very decentralized enterprise development teams. So focus on those things that are kind of at the shared operational and security layer of an architecture. And instead of building demo applications, like I see a lot of kind of the engineering excellence and developer tools team focus on, where they want to build kind of feature example applications that show the power of serverless. That's really easy to sell to a lot of people, but that's the type of code that teams are usually willing to write for themselves. When it comes down to the nitty-gritty stuff around secrets management and operations and instrumentation, the more you can provide those things out of the box, the more your executives will back and see the benefits of like evangelizing what you built for them. And then I mentioned operations a couple times already. That's the other area beyond security, that if you can implement aspects of operational quality out of the box into the artifacts you provide, that'll drive not just executive support, but a lot of adoption from teams who get those things for free now from whatever you deliver them. So dashboards, log repository integration, metrics and monitoring, all of those things. If you build a way for like an initially deployable boilerplate application to provide those things out of the box, the quality of software for those teams is going to be driven up so quickly that you'll just see kind of the benefits, creating a feedback loop for why people are going to be driven to what you build. So where do you start? how do you get it off the ground? You want to start on thinking about what do your developers do today? What are the common application technologies used? Are they building Spring Boot apps? Are they integrating with particular technology, message queues? Where are they today? And what types of serverless architecture patterns will bridge those architectural kind of dispositions and tendencies into a more modern set of architectures and services? So meet them where they are. Build boilerplate applications and sample artifacts that do the heavy lifting of things like security and operations, but do it for application patterns that are typically what developers are building in your organization. So the answer to the question of who owns implementing this, often forgotten. This is a real team that needs investment and should be built out by your organization. So if you don't have like a developer tools or a CCOE or an engineering excellence type organization, it's those folks who need to dedicate time to building out an actual scalable and product quality strategy. That's not just advocating for support of this strategy by your executive, but you're actually advocating for investment in you or your team or a new team having the time to build artifacts like this. And the last tip I have before I hand it over to Brittany is just the idea of where you're going to start iteratively. So you always want to start iteratively, but I find sometimes teams have a hard balance of understanding where to be opinionated and where to be extensible. Anything that is related to where you're applying kind of strict guardrails and standards, where you're trying to enforce an idea or a standard, that's something that you have to build from the beginning, mission critical quality, operations, and security. If you try to be opinionated about something that's not going to solve a critical problem as well as what they're using today is, you're going to get a lot of pushback. But any area where you're going to be iterative and be building MVP, so things like, if you're not opinionated about operational tooling that's going to be included or other best practices aspects, being MVP there is okay. But anything that you want to enforce, anything that you want to standardize, the team building these artifacts is responsible for kind of the mission critical quality. Okay, so I'm going to get out of the way and let you hear somebody who's doing it and has actually done it.
Thanks, Andrew. All right, so I'm Brittany Doncaster. I'm a distinguished engineer at Delta Airlines. Thanks. And I don't know if you guys have heard, but this thing called the pandemic happened. And when that happened, it kind of affected airlines ends up. We went from our best year as a company in 2019 to one of our worst years as a company in 2020. And it really kind of put us through the ringer, really kind of showed who had the resiliency to kind of stick with it. But it also showed some of the best leadership I've ever seen in a company at that time, where our CEO and our CIO actually decided, you know what, we have a downtime, let's take advantage of this, and let's see what we can do with this time. Let's move to the cloud. And so, we're moving. And we're just gonna load it all in a truck and ship it over, and it's gonna be that simple, right? Yeah, why are you laughing? Of course, it's that simple. So obviously, it's a little bit more difficult than that. As you're starting your cloud journey, you kind of have to decide, what are your goals? Why are you going to the cloud? What's the purpose of all of this work that you're about to invest in and do? And so we kind of had to take a step back. We had said, okay, we're going to go to the cloud. We're going to, next time, hopefully I need some wood. There's no other, okay, pandemic. But if there's something else that our business needs to react to, whether it's growing and hopefully not shrinking again like that, we need to be able to be versatile, and we need to be able to do that. And so how can we position ourselves? But what are our driving factors for going to the cloud? And so we first stepped back and said, what's the why behind our cloud migration? And it really was around 4 key principles that we were driving our migration off of. The first is employee satisfaction. The second is speed to market. The third is developer productivity. And the fourth one is cost reduction. And the fifth underlying one that we also talk about, but is not up here, is also reliability. So we as a company obviously run a 24/7 worldwide operation, and our systems have to run as such also. So we have incredibly high reliability metrics as well that we have to meet. one thing, if you know anything about Delta, is that we are a very people-focused company. And so you'll see in that previous slide, the first thing I listed was employee satisfaction. And really, we believe, and it's kind of similar to Amazon, they put customer first. We put our employees first, and we believe if you put employees first, that will come back through the customers, and it all kind of comes full circle. So if you treat your employees right, they'll treat your customers right, and it builds that brand loyalty and that dedication to flying with Delta that we want to see. And so you'll see here, it's a quote from Ed Bastian that I think came out during the pandemic, and it really just kind of showed that we wanted to focus on our people. And we wanted to keep that as well when we were going through our cloud migration. So you're probably sitting here going, I thought this was a serverless talk. Why are you talking about people? But actually, it all comes back to it. So if you look at Andrew's previous slide about why go serverless, what does serverless mean, et cetera, right? You start to look at, okay, greater agility, faster speed to market. You look at less operations and more product focus. And if any of you have grown up as a developer like I did, there's nothing that makes a developer more happy than being able to actually deliver business value and not have to worry about things like sizing your EC2 servers or setting up your auto-scaling rules. And you want to focus instead on the actual business application that you're trying to build rather than on, what we often refer to as undifferentiated heavy lifting, right? And so our serverless first strategy really aligns to our cloud migration objectives. And then at the end of the day, it aligns to keeping our employees happy, keeping our developers happy, and kind of getting out of their way to help them deliver value for the business so that we can deliver value to all of you who hopefully flew Delta here today. Unless you live in Atlanta. So how did our journey to serverless first really start? It was interesting. So we had said we were going to the cloud. We had kind of picked a strategy for which applications were gonna, be which one of the R's, the 6, 7 R's, refactor, replatform, blah, 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 re-architect, yada, yada. We had that whole strategy, and we're still trying to kind of pick our compute platforms and things like that. And so we had a few developer advocates, myself included, who really believed in serverless, believed in it as a strategy. And so we kind of got together and we started talking about the business case for it. So we drew up some numbers and we put together some spreadsheets about how we could drive value using serverless. But I think one of the best things we did was we went out and talked to people and we got all of the FUD out of the way. What I like to call FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And we kind of collected everybody's worries. Why do you not think we should go serverless? Oh, there's lock-in, there's this, there's that, right? And we put them all into a presentation and we just hit them head on. And we said, okay, you're saying this, but here's the answer we have for that. And you're saying this, but here's the answer. And we did that and we had it was a short slide deck, probably like less than 20 slides, but we basically went through and kind of like a myth buster. We went through each of the FUD topics and we said, we don't agree with this and here's why. And we just kind of hit it head on rather than trying to have these conversations where you kind of beat around the bush, but nobody really wants to say what the issue is. We just hit it straight on. And then we took that to our CTO and we said, this is what we think we should do. And here's all the feedback we've heard across the organization about why we shouldn't do it. Here's all the cons you're going to hear about why, but here's our answer to those cons. And here's the business case as well for why we think we need to go serverless. And after a few different discussions, and we brought Andrew in and our partners at IBM as well, and had a discussion with our CTO. And after a few discussions, he agreed. And so then we took it to our CIO, and we came in and said, okay, we're going serverless first. But now what? It's just that simple, right? We're going serverless first. Michael Scott, come in and say, we're going serverless first. That must be so. First of all, we have a pretty large enterprise. As you can imagine, Delta Airlines does not have a small set of applications. And so is everything going serverless? No. We have divided our applications up into different categories as part of our cloud strategy. So we're migrating some, we're containerizing a good bit of them, and then we have a few small set of applications that are actually our most mission vital applications that we're modernizing. So we're re-architecting those. And as part of that, we have adopted a serverless first strategy in that modernized area, but we're also applying it to new development as well. So as you start to look at the 6, 7, however many R's there are now in a cloud migration strategy, this is really what I would consider on like the right-hand side, the refactor, re-architect, and new development. And then we went through exactly what Andrew's kind of mentioning, right? So it's not just about going out and saying, thou shalt be serverless first. You have to actually build the patterns and pave the path for people to actually use these things. So I have a whole slew of development team right here in the 4th row. My awesome team, part of the Cloud Center of Excellence from Delta, and they are building all sorts of reusable patterns for people. So CI/CD pipelines, authorization for serverless applications, and things like that in order to standardize things, but also in order to remove some of that undifferentiated heavy lifting for developers. And that patterns, those templates, those can be reused for our serverless workloads as well as our container workloads. And we're really trying to make it so that we're enabling the organization and enabling developers to build that business value application and do that at speed. So when we talk about patterns and guidelines and pipelines and things like that, one of the big switches we've made as part of our cloud migration and cloud strategy has been architecture is no longer diagrams. So I would consider our team an architecture team, but we create code. We create repositories. We create templates that are reusable and not just Word documents or PowerPoints for people to use. And so we've done that, like I mentioned, through initial pipelines. And yeah, some of it is guidelines, do's and don'ts, best practices. But a lot of that is, again, through examples. And one of the other big things we've done is we've worked with security. So we talked with security throughout implementing the serverless first strategy, but we've also talked with security when it comes to how should we authorize APIs. We're using API Gateway, right? And we're co-creating some authorizers with them right now. And so we're doing a lot of that kind of implementation work in order to help development teams. And then we've produced a reference application. I know Andrew was talking about, you don't want to create these mythical applications that people can use. What we've found and what's been really helpful for us is we'll actually work with a team to develop an application pattern first. And then what we do is we actually harvest that pattern back into our reference application for others to see it and use it so that they don't have to go to other said application team. They can kind of see it in use in the reference application. But that reference application wasn't just created and the patterns that are in it weren't just created kind of in a vacuum, but instead with the development community, with the application teams. But we're still evolving. So, you know, you can come up. I'm sure any of these folks from the team would be happy to help answer questions as well afterwards about what we're doing, the kinds of templates we're building, the kinds of patterns that we're building, as long as you don't try to steal them. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so that's kind of how we have gone about our serverless first strategy and what we did. And we got our CTOs buy-in. We got them to kind of set the edict out there, but then we followed that up with a lot of enablement and a lot of just helping the developers with those things that they don't really think about when they're getting started because they just want to log into the Lambda console and start hacking away. But in order to put something into production, you really have to have a lot more, you have to have kind of a lot more of the foundations laid in order to kind of do that. And so that's what we've been focusing on. That's what we continue to focus on. And we're happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the room? Yeah. Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll run through the last couple slides, and then we'll just totally open it up. So reminder, training certification content, tons of self-paced labs, lots of serverless content, not listed here. There's lots of sample application repositories that we publish that show things like instrumentation. Really cool utility called Lambda Power Tools that we've published recently. If you've not seen that, that has tons of operational quality and like developer empowering things for Lambda. So remember that all this content is here. And then thank you. Remember your CSAT surveys and scores. But we've got a few minutes left here. So now I saw a hand up. We got a question. Yeah. It's like our old reInvent talk.
Yeah, I know it is. We used our old reInvent talk was using Lambda as a security organization. Funny enough, when I joined Delta, it was as a principal security architect, cloud security architect. So luckily, they'd already heard me like beat the serverless drum a whole lot within that organization. But when we started to have this discussion, we talked a lot about the type of security we need to build into the pipeline and the scans we need to put into the pipeline, but then also the runtime security. So we use a tool for runtime security as well. But we also talked about the reduction of kind of the threat landscape by using serverless and how much it was going to take off of their plate in terms of really kind of reducing the risk. And so we had a lot of discussions about the attack vectors essentially and how we were kind of reducing those. And when you're going to infrastructure that's constantly being recreated, that's a really good thing from a security perspective. And then on the flip side of that, your second question was about how the security team itself uses serverless. And they've become very big users of AWS config. And so they do use managed rule sets from config, but they also will write their own as well, which is Lambda functions. So they do some of that as well. And then there's also some security automations they have built and are building serverlessly.
Within that, and Brittany mentioned them, but I want to emphasize them. The absence of an operating system and having ownership of an operating system. Like, talk about one of the most ambiguous and important attack vectors that you have to concern yourself with and patch and manage. Like, that's gone. That's AWS's responsibility. Emphasizing that with the security team is huge. And then the other part, this big theme, is this concept of shift left security. You want to get security controls and visibility and reporting further left into the SDLC, closer to when code is written, into the deployment pipeline. And the amount of operational burden you reduce on security for OS monitoring and patching and all of those things should all be shifted left into tooling your CI/CD pipeline for scanning, scanning code repositories, all of those things. And you can justify that shift left investment with the reduced amount of responsibility teams will have in the OS side. But getting rid of an operating system responsibility, like, what security team wouldn't want to do that? Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah.
So as you were pitching serverless first to the CTO and CIO, how did finance think about it? Were they keen on it? Were they skeptical? Was it a lot more less predictable?
I'll be honest, we didn't ask their permission. But we did, as part of the business case we were showing to the CTO and CIO, we did talk about the cost savings and things like that, and how we could, how traditionally a lot of folks, when deploying on EC2 or something like that, can often be very much like over provisioned, and so how this would kind of help with that approach.
You were comparing to
on-prem.
Cloud or on-prem is all captains, right? So I was just wondering if you had any
Yeah, I mean, that's even an ongoing, I think, education within our, yeah, it's not even serverless specific, just as part of the cloud migration. So it's an ongoing education and journey, and a lot of it has to do as well with kind of putting in metrics to ensure you're being aware of costs and driving down costs continually as much as you can, right? And making sure that you're holding people accountable. So we're very big proponents of essentially giving the bill to the people who are responsible for the deployments. So if you're responsible for deployments and you're responsible for the architecture and you're responsible for the bill, you're going to make sure it's cost optimized. Yeah, you have to align, in my opinion, the FinOps model to the operating model. And if you don't align those two, then you're going to have friction. And so we've made the ownership of the finance align with the ownership of the platform in a true you build it, you run it model. And so by doing that, we ensure also ownership of the cost, which means you're incentivized to cost optimize.
I think we're out of time. Thank you for your attendance to this talk. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Remember to fill out your CSAT scores, especially if you enjoyed it. And we'll be out in the hallway. At least I'll be out in the hallway. I'm assuming at least some Delta folks will be. If you have more questions, we're happy to answer them. Hope you've enjoyed the summit again. It's one of the latest sessions, hopefully. So again, thank you for your time.